Hans Wormhat. In this video, I'm going to give just a few examples of time moving faster, just examples that I haven't really talked about. And a commenter actually brought this up. They said that they make some videos or something about health related things, and they told me that they get a lot of comments talking about people's periods being spaced farther apart. And that would make sense with time moving more quickly. The body just can't even keep up anymore. And one way that we would expect to see things like this is, yeah, if people's periods were becoming longer and longer, that would appear that time is moving more quickly. Also, kind of connected to this is, I don't have personal experience of this, but I believe it is true that women are starting menopause later and later in life. And also, we know that people can carry children later and later into life. And all of those go along with time moving more quickly. Being a 40-year-old isn't the same as it used to be. And oftentimes I think of how way back in the day, a 20-year-old woman who wasn't already married off and starting a family, people used to pretend like that was, they're already past the age where they need to be starting a family. And nowadays, that's clearly not the case. 20-year-old women, you don't look at them like, wow, you should have already started your family a long time ago. It's like early 20s is now a normal time to start a family. So I did see a lot of posts, stuff like this. It's kind of hard to quantify. It's just, I tried to search for people talking about there being longer time between their periods, and I got a decent amount of hits. I tried to find people talking about a shorter time between their period, and besides like one person saying they got a period twice in 1 month, which just kind of sounds like a freak event, I didn't really see that much of people saying, oh, my periods are getting closer and closer together. So a lot of these things, they're hard to quantify, but it just seems like there's a lot more people out there with longer periods, and I don't really see people complaining about their periods getting closer and closer together. And I'll point out here that people that take birth control, that regulates their period. So, and with time going faster, people could be getting way too many hormones now because they keep taking the pill every 24 hours, but 24 hours isn't what it used to be. Maybe that's what, there's a lot of things out there for lowering, like I see ads on TV for hormonal birth control that is lower amounts of hormones. And I guess here I'll just make a statement out there that a lot of people talk about their periods and they're like over the top talking about them, but they're just liar phonies who don't even get periods except for rare occasions when their hormones are working just right. I'll leave it at that. So you can't trust everything that you read. Now, kind of similar to this, time moving more quickly, people ask me a lot about babies, and I think the rampant C-section and inducing labor, if you go to a hospital and you're pregnant and it's near your, what they say is your due date, the doctors do basically everything that they can to push it forward and to just get it over with. And I think that a lot of women these days, they get their pregnancies induced ahead of schedule because they just have this 9-month whatever thing set in their mind. And their job is to just force the baby out of you. Doesn't even matter if you get messed up in the process. And look at this. About a third are born via C-section these days. So I think that's a big indication that women need longer to carry the children now. And the doctors are just, they have this date set in their mind. Oh, you're late, they'll claim. And then they'll start inducing all sorts of things. And since women aren't ready, they end up having to get a C-section. But I will say that there are an enormous amount of Swire births these days, and they almost always end in C-section. A lot of Swire people, they don't even try to do the natural birth thing, but a lot of the swire, they feel like they have something to prove. And so most of the people that are like over the top, oh, my body can do this, my body's built for this, like doing the whole at-home birth, water birth thing, those are almost all swires who they have something to prove. Cesarean section is very dangerous, invasive. My wife, every time that she's given birth, her waters have broken beforehand. And it's kind of strange because I've known some swire pregnant women who, women that they say like weird things, like they're jealous of that somehow. Like, I don't know. That's just all I know, is that they've pointed out to my wife, oh man, your water broke first every time. And they're like, mine never did. So I don't know if there's something there or not, but it's worth pointing out. And I guess just since my mind's always thinking about the end times, you know how when the firmament opens up and there's waters above, it's like a birth. There's gonna be the waters breaking. So there is this circadian rhythm thing, but it only works to a certain extent. And I liken this to, I don't know, all sorts of different things. And somebody just wrote a comment about the time speeding up thing, about how they like to tell us about how in times past, people would sleep for 4 hours and then wake up in the middle of the night, do a bunch of stuff, and then go back to sleep for a little bit more time later. Do you guys remember hearing stories about that? That would make sense if time was really, really slow. People could sleep and then wake up and it's still dark, do some stuff, and then go back to sleep. And in a similar way, stuff is just so sped up nowadays that it's out of whack. And 9 months, it just doesn't do it anymore. Even though we do have this internal clock, it's just time is too sped up. So 9 months just doesn't cut it. I guess the point I'm trying to make is births will stay within 9 months to a certain extent because we do have an internal clock. However, time has just sped up so much that the circadian rhythm just doesn't account for the time speed up anymore. It's too fast. Same thing with sleep. I think our bodies can adjust to it to a certain extent, but now at this point, 8 hours of sleep just doesn't cut it. Time is too short. So here's another topic. Cooking is a really interesting topic, and one I think about nowadays a lot is defrosting. It's a huge meme that just doesn't even make sense anymore of, oh, I forgot to take the meat out of the freezer before mom gets home, which is kind of disturbing that it's just understood that moms aren't home anymore to be able to do stuff like that, and they're out working. What do they call this, like latchkey kids or something? But the thing is children would get home from school and they would have been instructed by their mom, when you get home, take the meat out of the freezer. Nowadays, 2 hours is not enough to defrost a substantial piece of meat out of the freezer. That is not enough time. It's still frozen solid. When I want to cook ground beef later, I have to take the meat out of the freezer like 5 hours ahead of time if I want that to be defrosted. And it didn't used to be like that. 2 hours used to be enough time to defrost things. Nowadays, it's not. I like this talking about how you'll need 4 days. A 20-pound turkey will take 4 days to defrost. I don't think it used to be like that. Anybody that's been doing Thanksgiving these past, I don't know, 5-10 years, have you noticed that it seems like it takes forever for the turkey to defrost, and it takes forever for the turkey to cook? I've followed recipes before, and they've been way off. Like, I've had to cook the turkey like an hour and a half longer, 2 hours longer than what it tells me. And sure, some of it might be user error a little bit, but I don't know. So it's actually really hard to find old recipes that talk about cooking, and you'll notice that a lot of old recipes, they're just a lot more vague, and they didn't have digital thermometers back then, and they didn't used to have the like FDA guideline temperature that they were trying to reach. A lot of times it seems like they were just cooking the crap out of everything. But anyways, how to cook a turkey for Thanksgiving in 1911. I didn't see the original source here. That would have been nice. But this tells you that a large turkey will require 2.5 hours to cook. And they're telling you to baste it frequently. Every time you open that oven, the temperature drops. So could you imagine cooking a large turkey in 2.5 hours where you're basting frequently? That doesn't make any sense today. There was a really interesting manual for Army cooks. Unfortunately, it didn't end up giving me what I wanted to see about roasting turkeys, but it still was interesting how they talked about breakfast, dinner, and supper. They didn't used to do breakfast, lunch, dinner, and it looks like dinner was the largest meal of the day, but it kind of is taking the place of lunch. Breakfast was a large meal. Dinner, a very large meal, and then they kind of had a light supper. I thought it was interesting too. A lot of things don't change. Chili con carne, macaroni and cheese. But then a lot of things do change. Stewed prunes. So here's a recipe on roast turkey. But the thing is, if you read the recipe, they don't give you like set the temperature to this. I think they're literally roasting this turkey next to a fire. But they say a small turkey takes 1.5 hours. They say a moderately sized one, 10 pounds, is 2 hours. You cannot cook a 10-pound turkey in 2 hours. That doesn't work. But back then it probably did. 2 hours isn't what it used to be. I may as well just point out here, you know how when you watch really, really old film footage and it looks sped up? Yeah, it's because they used to be able to do a lot more stuff in 10 seconds. So when you play 10 seconds of old footage in 10 seconds of today's time, it looks really sped up. And yeah, shills will come out of the woodwork. Oh, undercranking. Oh, they did it to be funny. Well, if they did it just to be funny, why documentaries are sped up like that too? Just when there's a camera on the sidewalk and people walking by, those films are sped up too. Why would they speed that up for comedic effect? That doesn't make sense. Anyways, just to make a point about the food thing, it's kind of hard to really find definitive time comparisons of back then to today. And especially because when it comes to cooking, a lot of stuff is different. Here they're cooking at 325 degrees, but then they're saying meat thermometer should read 190 degrees. So the cook times here look a lot larger, 3.5 to 3.25 hours, all the way up to 7.5 to 9 hours. But they're cooking it at a pretty low temperature, and they're cooking it all the way to 190 degrees, whereas today they just tell you to cook it to 165. So the cooking thing, sometimes it's hard to find definitive answers, but I mean, there are some very questionable recipes out there that would not make any sense today. You can't cook a 10-pound turkey for 2 hours. And again, I don't know where the source is for this. I guess, yeah, I have no idea for this thing, but they were saying 2.5 hours for a large turkey, which is absurd by today's standards. Well, I'll leave it at that. Somebody made a joke in one of my previous videos saying that they should buy their Thanksgiving turkey right now and start defrosting it. And that is what it feels like. Thanksgiving will be here before we know it. And I think the whole turkey thing is a good way that you can tell that time has sped up. I know that me personally, I've noticed, man, stuff takes forever to defrost. And I've just, dang, this turkey is going to be cooking all day. And it's so hard to cook many things at the same time now. You know, it feels like there's not enough time for one person to make a whole Thanksgiving meal. Whereas back in the day, that's what grandma would do, would cook all of it. Nowadays, it's nearly impossible. God bless everyone.